Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Off the Top Rope, reviewing the debut episode of NXT on the CW. This is a really good show, a really good launch on network television for NXT. It's amazing to see where this brand has gone just in the last 5 years, considering they got rid of the black and gold. They went to 2.0. They rebranded themselves into this new thing, and they got themselves into a network television partnership on the CW. It was heavily promoted. Very exciting. A couple of huge matches on this show. This show really delivered. It really delivered on a lot of different levels. We get the really hyped up start where we get Shawn Michaels. Everybody's singing his music, which is great. Shawn Michaels is about to do the Are You Ready? And Triple H comes out. Triple H obviously has an intricate role in NXT, so that was really cool to see them. And this feeds right into the opening match, which is for the NXT Women's Championship. Roxanne Perez against Julia. I'm not going to, go nuts and bolts into a lot of these matches. I want to kind of get through to the point here. Because there's a lot of controversy in the decision that Roxanne Perez retain the NXT Women's Championship with the help of a hooded figure, which turned out to be a returning Cora Jade in her hometown of Chicago. Listen, a couple reasons why I think I'm okay with this decision from Shawn Michaels and NXT to keep the title on Roxanne Perez. Number one, the minute that they showed Stephanie Vaquer as being the next person in the mix for the Women's Championship, I was like, there's no way in hell Julia's winning. There's no way in hell Julia's winning. I didn't think Julia would get pinned. And I think that's another reason why people are taking an issue with it, which is weird because they're like, oh, she took a DDT on the floor and took a second pop rocks. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Julia's protected. She gets pinned in her second match. But if there's one thing we've learned about NXT, it's taking losses is not the end of the world. There's obviously an overriding point to, expanding this women's division. They tease later on in the show, Delta, a high-profile free agent from Australia, is coming in probably around Halloween Havoc. That's the date that was on the ad that they did for her. The other reason why I think, because really, the two reasons why I think that this was an okay decision is, one, Stephanie Vaquer's in there. It just didn't really make any sense to take the title off Roxanne Perez. And then when you find out that this match was opening the show and Ethan Page and Trick Williams was closing the show, you got the sense that it was going to be more of a night for Trick Williams than it was going to be for Julia. And I understand how this isn't going to land for a lot of the people who are, tribalist, and they're saying, the new acquisition lost in her second match on the show. I don't see it that way. I think the way NXT builds their rosters and their characters, this is one of those things, because if you paid attention later in the show, Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez hinted at, teaming back up again. They used to be NXT Women's Tag Team Champions. And then Cora Jade turned on Roxanne Perez. Roxanne's now a heel. So these two are friends. They've known each other for a long time. They're a big reason why both are in the same division in NXT. So I think that there's more to come out of this than just, Julia losing. So that's why I'm okay with this loss. Roxanne Perez also has had a fantastic, fantastic title reign. And I think you're losing out if you don't see, what's more out there, especially with Stephanie coming in and Delta coming in. You're really missing out on an opportunity, specifically with how high profile Stephanie Vaquer is, given that she was on an AEW show earlier this year against Mercedes Moné and outshined her. I think you're missing out on an opportunity to put her in the ring with Roxanne Perez. You could see a triple threat. You could see a fatal four-way. You could do whatever you want. And this also tells me that Roxanne Perez isn't going anywhere. So, and to be honest with you, even though the NXT women's division is loaded, I don't think that there's any rush to get Roxanne to the main roster. She's only 22 years of age. And so that's why I'm not broken up about it. I think a lot of people are losing their minds about that, and I think it was a little bit unnecessary. But that was a good match. Fun way to start the show. A couple of botches here and there. A lot of people were pointing to Julia, trying to get adjusted from the strong style, Japanese style, Joshi style, to the WWE style. It was a little bit different, but these two girls cooked. It's a good way to start off the debut of NXT on the CW. So then we We had a couple promos. There was a nice moment with CM Punk talking to Lexis King. That was an interesting little moment. We had Axiom and Frazier hyping up their match against A-Town Down Under, and they were playing up being distracted and potentially losing their championships. That match is going to happen next week in St. Louis, so that's great. And then we get into what I thought was one of the great matches of this entire show. Zachary Wentz and Wesley in a street fight. This was black and gold NXT through and through. This was just a fucking car crash, man. This was outstanding. In this match, like, Zachary Wentz hits the Van Terminator, but you could call it the coast to coast. It was a really good coast to coast, and just a lot of stuff happened in this match. So really, spot of the match, and maybe one of the spots of the show, and I'm amazed Zachary Wentz is still walking after this. He goes for the UFO cutter, his finisher that he beat Wesley at No Mercy, and Wesley proceeds to shove Zachary Wentz off the top rope all the way to the floor, misses a table that was set up at ringside for him to go through, and just hits the floor. That was nasty. Wes then dragged Wes basically he drags him back in the ring. There's just a bunch of stuff going around. There's a chain involved. So Wes is looking to hit Wes with the chair, but he hesitates, and that leads to Wes hitting a low blow. Hits him with a bunch of chain wrap punches, and then wraps his knees in the chain, hits a diving meteora on a chair for the win. This was fucking awesome. These two boys fucking killed it. I'm interested to see where Wesley goes from here, away from this whole storyline with the Rascals. Is Trey Miguel coming in? They're making it seem like this storyline is over and that Zachary Wentz and the Rascals' time in NXT is done. I'm curious to see how this looks for Wesley moving forward as a heel. I could potentially see a scenario. Obafemi's got a match against Tony D'Angelo. And they're heavily leaning into the fact that, by the way, Obafemi's going to pass Wesley's record for longest North American title reign ever. So we could see a scenario where Tony D'Angelo wins and maybe Wesley goes back after that North American title, because he couldn't challenge Obafemi, but now he can challenge Tony D'Angelo. That would be an interesting way to go. I could see him potentially going after Trick Williams for that NXT championship. That's another possibility. That seems a little bit more likely, to be honest with you, because Wesley, I think, especially being like there's not a lot of really good heels in NXT right now on the men's side. I could honestly see Wesley going after Trick Williams for the NXT championship. That would be a good first challenger for Trick. So that's interesting to kind of dive into. But this was a really good match. Wes and Zach really killed it. So then we get Miz TV with Tony D'Angelo and Obafemi. This was a really good segment. Really, they're playing up the fact that Oba has broken Tony D'Angelo and that Tony's not believing what he said. But Tony had a lot of these fighting words. He grew up in the streets of Chicago, popped the crowd. This is a really good segment. It was very interesting that the fans were already booing Miz after turning heel last night on Hard Truth. So maybe they did this segment by design because they had announced this like a week in advance. At this point, I would expect Tony D'Angelo to win the North American title next week. With Obafemi passing Wes's record, I believe this week, I think this is the reason why they're going back to this match. I think is because I think and with the story, the heavy Rocky 3 theme in it, I think leads me to believe that Tony D'Angelo is going to win and be the North American champion. Then we get that segment that I hinted at that basically shows Cora Jade being interviewed backstage. And Jade basically talks about how people forgot about her with Julia and Vaquer showing up. And Roxanne confronts Jade, say, "What the hell is that?" She talks about being former friends. I'm proud of the woman you've become. And they said, yeah, common enemies might bring us together. So I'm expecting them to probably be a tag, and maybe this leads to enemy of my enemy is my friend with Julia and Stephanie potentially teaming with each other. And then it leads to maybe a 3-way or a fatal 4-way down the road. There's a lot that they can do with this women's division at the top with those big names coming in and obviously Cora Jade coming back. So that's, like I said, one of the main reasons why I was okay with the decision to not have Julia just win the championship in her second match. Because I think there's a lot more that you can do with Roxanne Perez and what, to me, has been one of the great NXT women's title runs of all time. Like, she hasn't held it as long as Shayna Baszler or Asuka, but this is, honest to God, she's one of the great champions in the history of NXT. And NXT's got a very rich lineage, specifically with that championship. A lot of great women have held that title, and I think Roxanne's really at the top of the list, and she's only 22 years of age. Speaking of the women, we get a second women's match on this show. Jada Parker and Lola Vice taking on JC Jane and Fallon Henley of the Fatal Influence. Really what this came down to is a lot of tension between Jada and Lola. A lot of frequent interference spots and, miscommunication spots that lead to Jada Parker just walking off on Vice. Vice tries to valiantly fight back with some kicks, but ultimately gets hit with a combination move for the finish. And Fatal Influence wins. This is a 10 minutes match. This was a good story. What happened after the match was really interesting because Fatal Influence calls Kalani Jordan, who was at commentary on the side, and really she said before the match that she had a backup plan, and out comes Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair to Bianca's got a history in NXT. Jade's got no history in NXT. She was just viewing stuff when she was showing up. So that was a very interesting way, and it looks like we're going to get the Fatal Influence versus Kalani and the tag team champions, Belair and Cargill, in a 6-woman tag in St. Louis next week on NXT. So that's very cool. We get a nice little promo for Javon Evans, and also Randy Orton's mixed in there as well. Randy Orton shown after a match basically saying, hey, I pretty much was Javon, but I also have some ulterior motives that I want to hit a nasty RKO on him. I'm really looking forward to this match because Javon's going to show out for damn sure. Randy's going to win. Randy Orton's not losing. Randy Orton hasn't lost since he came back. But Javon Evans is going to get a really good showing, and it shows a lot that they're putting Javon Evans in a match with Randy Orton. That says a lot. Javon Evans is probably going to be a meme because he's going to probably get hit with one of the greatest RKOs of all time. Because one thing, Javon Evans, he gets bouncy. So I'm expecting something, as my sister says, sproing. She likes to say sproing when guys hit the ropes. So, but yeah, that'll happen next week. Obafemi, Tony D'Angelo, Belair, Cargill, Jordan versus Fatal Influence, and then the tag team title match between A-Town Down Under and Axiom and Frazier. Side note, I'm expecting after that tag match that the Motor City Machine Guns are going to show up in NXT, which will be another big time acquisition for NXT. So then we get the main event. It's Ethan Page versus Trick Williams for the NXT title with CM Punk as the referee. This was a fun match. This was a really fun match. Ethan Page hits Trick with an Ego's Edge through the table. Trick is able to break the count. And we do a callback to the spot that Ethan won the title on, where Trick hits the trick shot, falls down in exhaustion, and Ethan just falls on top of him for a 2 count. That was a good callback. So then towards the end of it, Trick hits a bookend on Page, which he gets a Punk kick. And Punk called Page a son of a bitch at some point. Because Page throughout this match was really complaining about what was going on in terms of the count and that it wasn't fair because he thought everybody was against him. Ethan Page has done a really good job in this heel role. I don't know where he goes from this. So then Ethan Page actually hits Trick with a GTS. That gets a near fall. Trick kicking out of CM Punk's move. It also shows you that a move imitation doesn't really get you to get a pin on somebody. So then Trick so then there's a little bit of a run-in spot where Trick slips out of the Ego's Edge, runs into Punk, and Punk's able to get out of the way. There's no ref bump here. Ethan goes into the ropes. and Trick just hits the trick shot and gets the win, and Trick Williams is the NXT champion. Hell yeah. Listen, I get why they did this storyline. They needed a little bit of a misdirection, and frankly, Trick Williams deserved a moment in front of this crowd. His first title win was in front of the NXT universe, which is a much smaller, more intimate crowd. It was a nice moment there for him to get it to cap off the first episode of the on the CW and be the face of this brand moving forward. It's the right call. He's a fantastic personality. He's getting a lot better in the ring. I think Ethan Page did a really good job in a relatively short, like 80-plus day title reign. But Trick Williams, I thought, was going to win this match, especially when they announced it as the main event and they put Roxanne Perez and Julia on first. It just, one of these matches was going to end with a new champion, and one of them was not. And it always felt like whenever Trick got back to Ethan, that Trick was going to win the championship. So this was a fun show, a fun match. Before the show goes off the air, CM Punk hits Ethan Page with a GTS to close the show. They did not have an overrun on network television, so that's another thing for you to watch out for, you NXT fans, for the last 5 years. NXT does not have an overrun this year. Another thing that I actually really liked, this is a little bit of a side note from me. They started announcing hometowns and weights again for the NXT competitors, whether it be male or female. Like, I mean, for women, they don't announce the weights. That's just like, that's just a standard thing. But they're announcing hometowns. They were just announcing names. Like, they're saying, introducing this person. I was just like, okay, like, I always like to, like, know where these people are from. It's just a weird thing for me. So they went back to doing that. Mike Rome did a good job in the ring. Good to see him. Again, like I said, I think Alicia Taylor's probably a beautiful person. I just don't like her as a ring announcer. Mike Rome is a very good ring announcer in his own right. So, again, really, really good show. I can see why a lot of people were, like, a little bit underwhelmed. There wasn't, like, that many big-time surprises on this show. I mean, they did tease Delta, and Delta's going to be more down the line. You obviously have Bianca and Jade show up on this show. That was a little bit of a surprise. Cora Jade being back was a bit of a surprise. I mean, the semi-divisive decision to, have Roxanne Perez go over, but I think it was the right decision just because of all of this talent coming in, and Roxanne is still there. Why not have her still be the champion? Like, yes, Julia is the high-priced acquisition in this big, shiny new toy. That doesn't mean that she has to win everything. I think the big thing that really has frustrated me is, I think, a combination of Vince McMahon's WWE and also Tony Khan's AEW with the rankings. We're programmed to think that wins and losses are an immediate determining factor in how we view characters. It's really about how these matches are booked and how these characters feel. And if you watch the way that finished, like, there's more of a story to be told out of this loss and how Julia can rebound from it. She's going to be angry. She's going to be more of a ruthless killer. She's going to want to be on the warpath for Roxanne and for, I'm assuming that Roxanne and Cora are going to align. And then you'll have the reluctant alliance of two rivals from, New Japan Strong and like a lot of the other independents all over the place in Stephanie Vaquera and Julia, who have a really storied rivalry. And then you could potentially get to that match. Like, if Julia wins, then you already hinted that Stephanie was next. Julia and Stephanie doing it that soon is a little bit of a risk, in my opinion. So Roxanne keeping the title, I think, is the right idea, because then you can experience another dream match with Stephanie, and then, just experiment with all these other things, triple threat, fatal four-way, tag, whatever. So there's a lot more that they could do. The women's division is not the problem in NXT. The men's division needs work, because now with Ethan Page losing to Trick Williams, like I said, really, off the top of my head, Wes Lee is the first guy that comes to mind. Opa Femi probably would be in consideration if he loses the North American title as well to go after Trick, but I think that Oba Femi right out of the gate facing Trick Williams is a bad idea. Those are two of your biggest stars on this brand right now on the men's side. But yeah, they got a little bit of a problem here in terms of who's going to be next for Trick Williams. So that's going to be something to follow. But this was a really strong show. We'll try to follow this week by week on a case by case basis to see how these shows are. We'll see how TNA factors into this stuff as well. Not a lot of TNA involvement outside of Zachary Wentz. So that's going to be interesting to see how that factors in now with NXT on the CW. But a really strong show. Love Vic Joseph. Him and Booker T are an amazing team, even though Booker can be fucking crazy on commentary. But a really strong show from Chicago, and the crowd really brought it. So that's it for this week, for this edition, the NXT on CW edition, special edition of Off the Top Rope. We'll have more content later in the week. AEW's 5-year anniversary coming up, and then obviously SmackDown later in the week. So we'll have a lot more content coming out here on the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. OT Mike Sports and Off the Mic 28 on Twitter. Talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.